where I want to start. One of the games that was super hyped up, and it should have been a game we never thought would be this hyped up, was Ohio State and Indiana. And the main question that is going to be asked, and I get why, is should Indiana be in the college football playoff even after losing 38-15, kind of in the fashion they did. We talked about aesthetics matter. Now look, to me, just from a 30,000 foot view, again, we're going to put out our top 12 tomorrow, Tuesday, whenever we decide to do it. But I did think there were some elements where Indiana looked like they belonged. The problem was, and this is what would hurt the most if you're Kurt Cignetti or if you're an Indiana fan, is you screwed up on the controllables, right? Handling punts, covering punts. Now, look, Caleb Downs, that was a great return. Maybe even take that one off. But you did a lot of the little things wrong. And all week, we sat here on Crane and Company and said, Indiana, and we looked at their schedule, has not played in a road environment like this. Not that they would be afraid, but procedurally, how much would it bother them? The first thing that Kurt Cignetti said in the postgame press conference, I don't think we handled the noise very well. And when you're a team that has to be methodical, like on that first drive when they were on script, you notice when they were on script, it was beautiful. You're like, Indiana not only got a 3 and out, the front seven can play with Ohio State, but this offense is not missing a beat. It was 2nd and 7, 3rd and 3, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2, 2nd and 1, shot down the field, run it. Justice Ellison breaks 2 tackles, gets the first down. And you're like, all right, Indiana's just going to be who Indiana is. But then the self-inflicted errors. So to me, I still think Indiana, especially after what happened the rest of yesterday with Ole Miss being eliminated, with Bama being eliminated, we'll see what has to happen with A&M, and we're going to get into all that. I think Indiana should still be in the college football playoff, not because they're an incredibly awesome team or they're as good or better than everybody thought, but I think the movement yesterday and them being 10-1, if they can finish 11-1, I don't think they should host. But I just don't know how I can sit here and say Penn State needs to be in, but they don't need to be in. Or Texas needs to be in, but they don't need to be in. But they're not an explosive team, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, Curtis Work, Dave, we talked about his lack of creativity, right? 8 out of 18, 68 yards. You look at the rushing. Leading rusher, Lawton, 79 yards. Ellison, 62 yards on 17 carries. Weren't able to hit a bunch of big plays. Ohio State was in the special teams game. Where are you at on Indiana, man?
You know what? Some similar sentiments right there. I was very impressed with some things Indiana did for about a quarter and a half, holding up well against OSU's run game, running the ball well themselves, converting on 3rd down against zone coverage and man coverage. I thought Rourke was able to identify that. The first drive they had when they went and punched it in at the goal line, a flawlessly called drive in the red zone there from Indiana, got a turnover, picked off Will Howard there. So they did some really good things. And then for 2.5 quarters, the Buckeyes imposed their will on you, right? And I can tell you from firsthand experience, that horseshoe, that's one of the toughest places to play in the country. And this product that the Buckeyes continue running out on the field season after season after season is just always so impressive, the way that they're able to reload. So those are my thoughts on the game. I was watching it with an Indiana fan, and obviously for 2.5 quarters, man, that thing just really started to drag. And I looked over to him at the end and I said, not a top 12 team, right? And he said, no, you can't play like this and be a top 12 team, right? And so I was like, well, to me, you're on the very definition of the bubble right now, that 12, 13, 14, 15 type of range. Even though you lost to the number 2 team in the country and on the road, right? You're on that bubble. And then a few minutes later, Ole Miss loses to pick up their 3rd loss. And through the chaos for the state, Alabama loses to pick up another loss. Well, if you're on the bubble in that scenario and teams continue to lose, then you have to take their spots, in my opinion. And that's still with a week to go. Rivalry week this next weekend, Texas A&M. We're still going to get Clemson, South Carolina. So again, every week continues to deliver. I'm right there in that bubble range on Indiana.
Blaine, I obviously what you think about the game. I do want to point out, it was funny because early that first drive went so well for Indiana. Ohio State was able to find the way to tie it up, but then Indiana got that goal line stand, right?
Yep.
And you're like, hey man, look, this one is going to be nuts and bolts for 4 quarters. Probably going to come down to, who's got the ball last or who can have that 4-minute drive to melt the clock and kick a field goal to win. But Blaine, it was not that. And when you look at Ohio State's numbers, it wasn't like they had an incredible day offensively. Will Howard was 22 of 26, very, very efficient.
Yeah, I thought he played
201, 2 touchdowns, a lot of underneath throws, right? A lot. Indiana was giving them some space on early downs, some check downs. Their leading rusher was Trevion Henderson, didn't have 70 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Their leading receiver was Igbuka that had 80 yards and a touchdown. But it was methodical. It was almost like Ohio State beat Indiana the way that Indiana has been beating these other teams.
Yeah, and we talked about this, and trust me, I took Indiana money line just because of who Kirk Cignetti was, right? The one thing I thought about Indiana they wouldn't do was beat themselves because at the end of the day, Ohio State, they have better personnel than you. All right, they do. So the one thing you can't do is shoot yourself in the foot, and you did that repeatedly. I haven't seen the special teams meltdown like that in a long time. And the one thing I kind of do look at in the Indiana's offense, they just don't have that big play guy. Right? They don't have that one difference maker on that side of the ball. And we can look at that Ohio State offense, and they have littered in that offense. Jeremiah Smith, who's 14 years old, absolute baller. Mbuka, baller. Trevion Henderson, baller. Judkins. And at the end of the day, Jake, and we've talked about this a lot, as good as the players are, it all goes through Will Howard. All right. It all goes through Will Howard. And I thought Will Howard played well. I thought this score could have been worse at the end of the day. And the more I look at Ohio State and the more I look at Oregon guys, they look like the two elite teams in college football, and everybody else might be mediocre.
Yeah. I want to pose this question in the chat as well, because I put this out on social media yesterday. And obviously there's a, instant overreaction from either side. And our friend Adam Brenneman said, stop it. But I believe it. And not because sometimes I think we got to take off the conference, they're in this conference, they're in that conference glasses, and just look at two teams. And what I said was, I think South Carolina right now is a better team than Indiana. Now, that doesn't mean that South Carolina is going to get into the playoff. They're most likely not. They have 3 losses. Indiana's got a much better chance to get into the playoff. But that still can mean that I think South Carolina right now is a better team than Indiana because they have some of those elite playmakers. That isn't to say that if they played 10 times, I think South Carolina would win 6 of them, which to me makes them the better team. But, to you guys quickly, am I way off on that, you think?
No.
Or is it something that you guys are seeing right now? Because say what you want. I know South Carolina kind of walked in the tulips a little bit with Wofford, but then they drowned them in the lake in the same garden.
But isn't that what makes this year and this sport in general so great? I mean, how many times have we seen where it's Georgia and Alabama are elite and everyone else, you're absolutely irrelevant. Right now, it is more like the parity in the NFL. So you're talking about, you think South Carolina could line up across from Indiana and beat them? South Carolina could line up across from Oregon and beat them. I don't know. Just like I'm not fully convinced that if you line Texas and Indiana up across from each other, that Indiana couldn't beat Texas. It really is an any given Saturday situation, like we've talked about any given Sunday with the NFL. 2 more things quickly on the actual game. Blaine, I'm glad you brought up Will Howard. He played fantastic. I mean, he played the way that he needs to play if the Buckeyes are going to win a national championship. 14 of 14 at one point, and he was using his legs, scrambling, getting out of pressures. And then the Buckeyes on defense too. The way that they brought pressures effectively in that game. I thought that when the Buckeyes beat Penn State, that was Chip Kelly's win. Yesterday, I really thought this was Jim Knowles' win. And so to have 2 coordinators on both sides of the ball that can really be that effective in huge games is what makes the Buckeyes so lethal, I think.
And let's get to the chat here, Blaine. Remember, if you donate, it's on topic. It will get read. Quickly though, they did what we thought coming out. Right, we knew Indiana wasn't going to change themselves, but defensively, Jim Knowles played too high and saw what he could do with 6 in the box, and it was working.
Which is why Indiana stayed committed to the run. They stayed committed.
They did. But that first drive, they went down there. But what did you see on that second drive? You saw some of that heat early.
Yeah.
Right. There were times where they brought the house. I mean, they said,
there's
right,
no
we're gonna play
answer.
0 coverage.
Yeah.
Well, why would I not? Why would I not, when Surratt and Price and Lawton and I know Lawton's a running back, but they would buzz him out there, and Williams, these guys, why would I not, when I don't fear them running by me?
Getting
it's the
separation.
same reason why I mug a tight end with a safety. And by mug, I mean walk him down, because most tight ends aren't outrunning my safety. Where are you going to beat me if it's a tight end? It's probably underneath in the intermediate, or if you're going to throw some sort of deep shot, it's going to be a rebound jump ball anyway. So I thought Jim Knowles said, all right, there. I saw if maybe we could just line up and I could just show you how much bigger mine is than yours, but that didn't work. So let's start heating guys. There was times And look, Indiana busted some protections too,
Bad.
where Ohio State just came flying through. Rourke had no chance, and these weren't some exotic pressures. I mean, they were bringing bullets, they were bringing snake, they were bringing cross guts. I mean, this is day one stuff. So it was it was Jim Knowles pulled the trigger pretty fast after that first drive, and I don't blame him.
It's amazing how much better Ohio State looks the closer Caleb Downs gets to the line of scrimmage. If
He's a dude, bro. He's an
I'm
NFL.
building my defense.
He's a first round draft pick, and he's running punts back.
Yeah,
like